News 4 Jax starts now.
Tropical storm Nicole expected to strengthen with hurricane force winds today. We remain under a tropical storm warning at this point. This is a live look in St. Augustine, and concerns about flooding remain. And we saw problems at high tide this morning. Look at that. And here's a live look at downtown Jacksonville, where Mayor Curry and city officials plan to begin a news conference in about 5 minutes to bring us up to date on city preparations for Nicole. And we have new information for you about school closures. You've been asking. Here it is. Duval and Nassau announced schools will be closed tomorrow, and they're closed Friday as well because of the Veterans Day holiday. Here's the complete list. No school Thursday in Clay, St. Johns, Putnam, and Flagler counties either. Meantime, Nassau County ordered evacuations for people living in zones A and D. So Zone A includes Amelia Island's beaches and low-lying areas. Zone D includes Nassauville, Black Rock, Pirates Wood, and Chester. Meantime, the Florida National Guard activated 570 members of the Guard to support storm response efforts. They're on standby statewide. So let's get to Rich for the latest on the storm's track. Rich.
Yeah, we're just watching here, and if you want, I was just explaining that the last update was the former 11 o'clock update, but here we are at the lunch hour, which was 11 o'clock, so the 11 o'clock update came in. The reason is that it is now sitting over top of, watch right there, it's sitting over top of the Grand Abaco, and that will continue to push then into the Grand Isle over top of Castaway Key before eventually moving in South Florida. No particular exchange in any of the numbers that look like it's strengthening, at least for the moment. We still have 70-mile-an-hour winds, which makes it a very formidable tropical storm. And like you were saying, it's likely to get that moniker here as a hurricane. Only needs 4 more miles. The barometric pressure for a tropical storm is fairly deep at 985, and the forward speed kind of hitting the brakes a little bit. It was at 14, now at 12 miles per hour. Category 1 expected. This is later today. Most likely David and John will take you through what will be that increase and the name change. Then we'll be picking up the story when we start tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock. The inroad looks like it's still going to come in now, back to what we were saying in the beginning of the week, that it's closer to West Palm Beach, maybe just to the north around Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, and then moving across Lakeland in interior northeast Florida, here across parts of north central Florida, before back out. And where it looked like it was more toward Tallahassee, we could say maybe splitting the difference between Perry, Florida and Tallahassee as it makes that inroad here on shore, which this is going to have its own issues also on the Gulf Coast, anywhere from Cedar Key and up through the Steinhatchee River, where the potential for at first it's going to be all of the water getting rushed out with the offshore wind on the west coast, and then as it turns, here's the onshore push, and we've seen issues there before. The color changes on the map. If you have been watching throughout the morning, you remember that this area here all the way through Bradford County, Columbia County, Baker were tropical storm watches, which is what we're seeing now, also including Waycross. All of those have become warnings, and I do expect the areas of southeast Georgia also to become those tropical storm warnings. But let me skip through the radar here, because here's where it's getting really interesting. Bruce and I went out for breakfast, gandered over at the river as we were coming by. I was like, wow, look how high the river is. Then we got to the station, and the street just out in front of the station, all the way up to our parking lot, kind of looks like what it does here at Doctor's Lake, because the St. Johns River over at the kayak launch, which is just behind the station and off to the east a little bit, is already starting to flow, and those neighborhoods that are behind us are starting to see that here as well. And let's see. All right, good. We got St. Augustine back on, and I know we were showing these shots, but the tide came in here starting at 9 this morning, and even before that, Bruce, we were commenting that, wow, look at that, the waves are already lapping over the bulkhead, and now with that tide increase, we're starting to see that spill over, and we're starting what will be the first round of flooding. There'll be another round coming up late tonight. I'm going to break this down for you coming up, and then again, we've got a couple of rounds to get through for the impact day, and that's on Thursday. So stay with us here in the noon hour, and I'm going to take you through that here in just about 15 minutes. Bruce?
Thank you, Rich. Coastline is already getting battered because of high tides and a full moon the other night. Live look at St. Augustine Beach from our Skycam at the Guy Harvey Resort. In a little bit, we're going to take you out there. Amanda DeVoe is further inland in downtown St. Augustine. But I want to stay with this shot. I can tell you that there's already been flooding in downtown St. Augustine. We showed you earlier a car that was stuck in the water just along the banks there. Every time there's high tide during a storm like this, we had the full moon the other day. There was flooding there as well. That is going to repeat itself. If you had problems during Ian, as Rich has been telling you, you'll probably have flooding this go-round as well. Once again, we want to tell you some of the new information that we've heard. Duval and Nassau County schools will be closed tomorrow and again on Friday because of the Veterans Day holiday. Many of the after-school activities today and tomorrow canceled as well. All right, we're about to take you to downtown Jacksonville, where Mayor Lenny Curry and emergency responders here will bring us up to date on the city's preparations for what's being done here in Jacksonville. Is about to begin. Okay, the mayor hasn't taken the podium yet, so I'll tell you what. Okay, they're coming out right now. We're going to find out what emergency management officials have planned for the city of Jacksonville and what is on tap, what's going to be closed. We understand that the courtrooms are closed tomorrow, as are some city offices. Let's listen in.
Thank you for joining us for our second official briefing on Tropical Storm Nicole and the city's preparedness efforts. At the last report, Nicole was moving closer to the coast of Florida and is still expected to make landfall south of Duval County sometime very early tomorrow morning as a Category 1 hurricane. At this time, Duval County remains under a tropical storm warning. While overnight, Nicole's track shifted to the west and Jacksonville is now out of the cone, this does not mean we will not feel significant impacts from the storm. In fact, just moments ago, the National Weather Service asked that we make this very clear. Do not pay attention to the cone and where Nicole is headed. Instead, pay attention to the radar, forecasts, watches, and warnings for our area. The biggest threat to Duval County remains to be intense storm surge and flooding along the coast and along the St. Johns River. This, combined with bands of rain and strong winds throughout the storm, makes flooding in low-lying areas the biggest concern for our neighborhoods. We could see waves at the beach as high as 10 to 15 feet. Inland, we may see storm surge 3 to 5 feet above ground level. These conditions are expected even without a direct hit from Nicole, even with the latest shifts in the track. And with that shift, tornadoes are a much bigger risk for our area. The increased potential for tornadoes begins during the pre-dawn hours tomorrow, while many of you may be asleep. Please be prepared as possible and make sure you and your family have an emergency plan. Back to the beaches for a minute. Let me say this. I watched the local news this morning where reporters on the beach covering the storm saw people swimming in these extremely rough waters. Stay out of the water. I can't be clear enough. It's extremely dangerous and you're risking your life and the lives of those that would have to come and rescue you. All three of our beaches' mayors join me in this important messaging. Because of the anticipated weather conditions, I have signed a declaration of a state of emergency in Duval County effective midnight tonight until the system and its effects have cleared Duval County. Earlier today, Duval County Public Schools announced all schools will be closed tomorrow because of the storm. In order to accommodate city employees with students in the Duval County Public School system, we are announcing that city offices will also be closed tomorrow, November 10th. Offices are already closed Friday, November 11th, in honor of Veterans Day. At this time, I'm also announcing the suspension of all garbage, recycling, bulk pickup, and yard debris collections for this Thursday. Friday will be collected as scheduled, and a makeup day for Thursday will be this Saturday. So again, if your usual pickup day for any of these services is Thursday, that will not take place this Saturday. Earlier this morning, the Chief Judge announced that Duval Courts will be closed tomorrow and Friday. Also, the Jacksonville Fair announced yesterday it will be closed today and tomorrow, with plans to reopen on Friday at 3 p.m. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., we will open two shelters, the Legend Center and Landmark Middle School. Both shelters are open for those with special needs, the general population, and both are pet-friendly. We do not expect evacuations, but we want to make sure shelters are available for those who are in need. Finally, if you have not already, now is the time to make sure you have your supply kit together, that you know your flood and evacuation zones. Also, with the heightened threat of tornadoes, now is the time to review your safety plan with your family. If you have yard debris, make sure it's cleared and not blocking storm drains. And now is the time to walk around your property and secure loose items. Yesterday, Public Works activated their inclement weather plan, and crews are out working today to make additional preparations. Our Director of Public Works, Steve Long, is here to address any questions you may have. Let me add something before I hand over the podium. The decisions made today are out of an abundance of caution. It's impossible to predict the exact impacts of Nicole will have on Jacksonville and our beaches communities, but we're making the best decisions with the information we have. What we do know is the weather event should be out of here by Friday morning, and Friday afternoon should shape up to be a nice day, leading into a beautiful weekend. In conclusion, remember, if you have any questions that are non-emergency related, call 630-CITY. Beginning at midnight tonight, lines will be open 24 hours, and extra operators will be available to handle any call volume. With that, I invite Chief Ellis Burns to talk about Jacksonville Sheriff's Office preparations.
Thank you, Mayor Curry. So we're fully staffed, ready to go, continuing to watch the forecast as it's coming in, working with the National Weather Service. Everybody always thinks about the bridges, which is a good question. We'll monitor them closely. We're not so much concerned with the number, the mile an hour sustained wind until it gets to be about a minute or so, but we do take gusts in consideration as well. So we're working with FDOT on that to measure the wind speed at the bridges, and we'll closely monitor that and address them as needed. But other than that, any questions related to JSO? All right, thank you.
Any questions?
What is the possibility of evacuations down the line? They have already issued evacuations north of us, south of us. What about Duval County?
I mean, things could always change, but at this point, we don't have any plans to evacuate.
It's on the heels of Election Day, late in the season, kind of an unexpected storm that snuck out at us. Do you feel like Duval County is aware of the threat and is really, prepared for this?
Yeah, we're always prepared, and we're here communicating like we always do, and everybody's been working around the clock. So I just encourage people to continue to stay tuned to their local news so they know what's going on.
What's your message to people who maybe haven't been paying attention?
Pay attention.
Now, just a couple of questions. We're already seeing flooding around the city this morning. What areas are a particular problem? And then when I hear, 10 to 15 foot waves at the beach, what does that really mean? Is that going to cause damage? What can we expect?
Steve, I'll let you address.
Yes, thank you. Public Works, Steve Long. As far as for the drainage issues you're seeing already, they're related to the elevated tides. We have crews out working to make sure our drainage systems are open and in place so that we can drain as well as possible. With the elevated tides, we know that impacts the drainage systems. However, as the tide cycles go, the drainage will get better and better as we approach, into the weekend. We expect elevated tides on Thursday and going into Friday, but we're working hard to make sure those drainage systems are open so recovery happens as quick as possible. As far as for at the beach with the waves, that those waves are breaking. They're not coming over the dunes at this point, and it's something that'll just have to be observed as we move forward to see how to react. Thank you.
I know you're talking about the drains, but like I said, we're already seeing flooding like on Pottsburg Creek. It's gone way over. Is this going to be the problem, and is this going to get much worse, or what's going to happen throughout the day and tomorrow?
As Mary Curry said, the National Weather Service has said that you can expect to see somewhere between 3 to 5 foot tidal increase over what we're experiencing at regular tide levels. So the flooding you're seeing now is as those tides start increasing, because they aren't going to come up in a matter of minutes. It's going to increase as we go through time. And so you're starting to see those increases occur. And then National Weather Service has said it could be up to 3 to 5 feet.
Are the pumps on in San Marco, and what's going to happen in Riverside along the new, at Riverside Park, not Riverside Park, Memorial Park? What are you anticipating there, and are they done with that work there?
Right now, our pump stations are all on. They're all working as need be. When water enters into the pipe system and reaches the pumps, they're on to evacuate that water. As far as from Memorial Park, if the tide gets up and it comes over the bulkhead into the park, you'll see flooding occur. And then as the tide goes down, as we go into the weekend, you'll see the water recede and evacuate.
Just one final question. Have there been any reports of any damage yet from this morning? Any homes flooded yet? Have you heard anything?
I have not received any reports of home flooding at this point. No, sir.
When it comes to the San Marco element, this is for Public Works as well. I know you have the lift stations, but you have the supplemental pumps from Ian. Are you going to be doing that again this go round?
Yes, ma'am. Those were set up already. It's in place so that we can do as much as we can to protect a very low-lying area that we know about in San Marco. So that's up and running. Yes, ma'am.
Are you guys anticipating this to be as bad as Ian or worse in town?
Based on the National Weather Service prediction of 3 to 5 feet, they say that could be a little bit higher than we saw in Ian, and so it's as we monitor and go forward, it'll just depend on how the storm how the storm approaches, the wind fields, that sort of thing, as it pushes that tide into the river.
For JEA, The winds yesterday, I know were not really storm related, but we had a lot of winds. What's standing now? Are there power outages? What's happening, and what are you expecting?
When I came over just a few minutes ago, we had one outage that was very small, and as the winds pick up, then we would expect to see the possibility of more outages. But we are prepared and have crews standing by, ready to respond.
Any more questions?
Just one more thing to add. As the low-lying areas that we typically experience with flooding become flooded, Public Works does a great job of blockading these off, barricade them. I'm asking, please don't drive around it, don't drive through it. Do as the mayor said, stay off the roads of the wind. Do not drive in any areas that have standing water in them. And sometimes we see people move the barricades in the street that's closed off. People drive right through it. So we're asking, please don't do that. Just creates unnecessary.
Blocked off now?
Not currently that I'm aware of at this point. But we're working with Public Works to make sure that we have those intersections shut down as needed.
And for Mayor Curry, this is just one more question about the possibility of evacuations. With Ian, you told folks in Zone A, get ready.
Right.
Do they need to be ready if this is potentially worse?
I mean, I think if people are in these low-lying areas that are typically prone to flooding, they ought to be alert. They ought to have an exit strategy. When we go through evacuation decisions, typically when you're looking at what could be a direct hit, you have a window of time where you have to make sure people, a direct hit, they're notified so they can get home from school, home from work, etc. We're not looking at a direct hit. Based on estimates from the National Weather Service, we know what event we could be facing. If you're in those areas that are prone to flooding, you ought to be alert and prepared. Thank you.
All right, let me recap. First, I just checked to see where that JEA outage they were talking about is. Just off Trout River Boulevard, and it affects about 48 homes. Crews have been assigned. They are assessing the situation right now. Is it Trout, not far from Restoration Baptist Church. To recap what the Mayor was talking about, a state of emergency to be declared as of 8 o'clock tonight. What that means is they've got the ability to attach resources should the funding be necessary to tackle any issues. Duval County Schools, Nassau County Schools will be closed today. They are not going to have garbage pickup tomorrow or recycling pickup. That will be rescheduled for Saturday. 2 shelters will be opened tomorrow should people decide that they want to leave their homes. If they feel as if they are in trouble or in danger, they will be at the Legend Center and also at Landmark Middle School. They will open tomorrow morning as well. Also, the mayor was saying that he was watching the news this morning, presumably right here at Channel 4, since we had the interview with a young lady from Jacksonville University who went into the Atlantic Ocean waters, and he reminded people that they are being advised to stay out of the Atlantic. The other thing that he was talking about was the potential for tornadoes to whip up, and Rich had been talking all morning long about the fact that because of the shift west of the storm itself, the tornado damage was actually going to be mitigated a bit. Rich, so could we clarify that?
So yesterday, and even most of this morning before the update came in, our area had about a 2% chance. And I showed you some of the products, and I'll go back to those here in just a moment. And if you remember, a couple little yellow blips that showed up saying, all right, look, if we see, and I wasn't saying that we weren't going to see, I said if we see that these are going to be isolated with just a very slight chance. I mean, this just zipped all the way into Saturday, and nothing showed up. This one's a little slower. Let me let this one play through, and we'll see these little spots with yellow popping up. But this is wind and hail. This is more of what's going to be the impact for the wind. Now, with those little areas of yellow sneaking in here, this is going to etch out a little area coastal wide where most of us are still at 2%. As we get closer to the beaches, it does increase by 3%, so it adds up to a 5% chance along and near our coastal impact areas. These look like they would be more likened to almost like waterspout type formation, catching the friction from not only the surface of the water, but then the beaches here as everything is pushing on shore, and that could prompt those quick spin ups. And that's the only thing that I'm seeing, at least from the models, because with the last update that came in, it says that with the expanding wind field, we're going to see the tropical storm force winds. We've already got that, but otherwise, there's no significant changes to the total rainfall forecast and or the tornadic threat. So if we are looking at what are incremental increases here from 2% to what will be a little bit of an area at 5%, they could be possible. Let's dive deeper into this when I see you back on the other side of the break.
Okay, you also heard Jim Pickett asking the mayor about area flooding, Pottsburg Creek, places like that. The storm surge along the coast will continue to be a problem. Flooding along the river will certainly keep you posted. And I just got this note from the St. Johns County Supervisor of Elections office. It says the St. Johns County Supervisor of Elections office will remain open until 5 o'clock this afternoon and from 8:30 to 5 tomorrow in order to meet statutory deadlines for those of you who voted to provide cure affidavits for vote-by-mail ballots and provisional ballot evidence to the election of supervisor's office in order to make sure that your ballot counts. So if there had been a problem with your ballot, perhaps there was a signature issue, and you want to make sure your vote counts, it will be open till 5 this afternoon, 8:30 to 5 tomorrow. It is 12:20. We'll be right back.
Marine 4 on News 4 Jax, Channel 4, the local station.
It's free for life. That's amazing.
Line getting battered because of high tides and a full moon the other night. News for Dex reporter Amanda DeVoe is further inland. Downtown St. Augustine is where we find her, and she joins us live. So waves whipped the walls along the banks of downtown earlier, and there was flooding during high tide. What's it like right now?
Well, at this point in time, those floodwaters are starting to recede and have done so for much of the morning after our last live report at 9:30. So as you can see here, looking much better. But of course, officials do not want to take anything to chance. This road, in fact, is still blocked at Avienda Menendez Street, right near the Bridge of Lions. This is on the one side. The other side is still open and cars are able to get through. But as you can see there from those lime green cones, again, that road is closed. We did speak with a couple from out of town, and they said that they were not expecting this.
We're here on a bicycle trip, and we're not going to be doing any bicycling. So we're from the West Coast, Westport, Washington, and we get weather like we still get hurricanes. So this is significant for us. It's kind of fun to see.
The entire city of St. Augustine is under a voluntary evacuation order. We've been telling you about this all day. We have video of employees from a local business stacking up sandbags ahead of the storm. Those sandbags are available today at Francis Field until supplies run out. They are free, but you do have to bring your own shovel. Also, to let you know, 2 shelters will open in less than an hour at 1 p.m. That's the Solomon Community Center, which is pet friendly and open to the general public. The Health and Human Services Department is also also an option for people with special medical needs. The downtown St. Augustine parking garage also available for people who live in flood-prone areas, so make sure you take advantage of that. Also keep in mind that the St. Johns River ferry service is suspended today and tomorrow. County officials say although people don't have to leave, they encourage people to do so.
If you are in an unsafe location, a low-lying area, or if you flooded in Ian or a nor'easter last year, we want you to be safe and to seek shelter.
And again, here at downtown St. Augustine, you can see that the wind is still whipping. Again, those floodwaters are starting to recede. But again, officials do not want you to take anything to chance because things, of course, can change throughout the day and into tomorrow. But at least for the moment, make sure that you're taking things very carefully. I'm live in downtown St. Augustine. Amanda DeVoe, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, thanks, Amanda. There's an information line open for St. Johns County residents who have storm-related questions, 904-824-5550.
Exact Track 4D, the Weather Authority's secret weapon against severe storms. The most cutting-edge weather technology in Northeast Florida and South Georgia.
All right, picking up where we left off. Possibility of tornadoes. I never said there was not going to be tornadoes. Yes, they are going to be the potential here for isolated, and it looks like most of it would be in our coastal zones. Part of it's the friction, the winds coming on shore, and that could be enough that at least in the lower level starts the rotation. Otherwise, it's directional or it's wind shear, which is just increasing speed with height, which typically negates it. We have seen the area of tropical storm watch continue to shrink, and the area of tropical storm warnings continue to expand. That's your telltale sign, folks, that it's getting closer. But how long does this last? This has been one of the biggest questions. You know, how long are we going to be in this? Is this like, you know, a Thursday into Friday? Let me break it down because it's actually, with the model updates, coming in a little bit quicker than what we were looking for as far as the dry air. So here we are at 10 o'clock. This is where we'll start to see some of the pounding rain, but really some of the heaviest stuff comes in 1 o'clock, midnight or so. We've got it here for St. Augustine, lifting into Jacksonville. Remember, we're starting about a half hour early. We'll be starting at 4 o'clock tomorrow. I'll be in at 3. We'll have everything set up and we'll be answering your questions and getting you caught up. But look at what happens here by about 11 o'clock. We're seeing the dry slot move into Flagler, St. John's, 10 o'clock to the lunch hour, now at Jacksonville. This was originally about 2 o'clock, and here we are at 7. There's 9. There's 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock on Friday morning. We're still at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. This has been with us, this round of what will be some shower activity into early Friday, possibly a storm or two as this blows through. And beyond that, things start to dry out and do so rather readily. The concern, as I have said all morning long, is going to be flooding, whether it's localized here because of some rainfall and or because of our bloated rivers and all of the tributaries. Folks, this started to cross the threshold here of the boat ramp well before, and we're just now getting closer to the high tide. It's actually at 12:55 in the area, and our tide here for downtown Jacksonville was at 10:30, and we were still seeing some river flooding and some street flooding as late as 11:30 and almost up to the top of the noon show when David and I walked out just to look to see what was going on. As the wind load continues to increase, the water's going to slow down, the levels are going to fill up, and I illustrated this before, and let me just grab something here that is a box. When we're talking a 3-foot surge, it's not 3 feet this way, it's 3 feet this way. It's a vertical sense of everything starting to climb, and that is what is going to lead to the potential, that was loud, lead to the potential here for.
We are continuing the conversation this morning about secret cameras and your privacy, specifically what's legal and what is not. So last night we revealed how easy it is to hide cameras in a home. Our Joy Purdy tried to find them after they were placed in a local Airbnb. It took some real searching. She found some, but not all of them. About a month ago, this man, the president of a Flagler County Condominium Homeowners Association, was arrested for a second time, stemming from an investigation involving a woman who called deputies when they say she found a camera hidden in a flower pot in the master bedroom of her grandmother's condo. Investigators say that Robert Orr recorded himself placing the camera in that pot, and it's now investigating. Flagler County Sheriff Rick Staley is joining us now via Zoom. Good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Jen.
So, Sheriff, I'd like to talk about the investigation in just a moment into Mr. Orr. But first, hidden cameras, as we know, they're easy to buy online. They're fairly inexpensive. Would you explain when their use could be considered illegal?
Sure. So every case is different, has to stand on its own merits. But generally in Florida, it's a two-party consent state. which means the person that's doing the recording and the person that is being recorded must give consent. In other words, you have to have knowledge that you're being recorded. Now, there are some exceptions to that. One is if it is an active law enforcement investigation, both parties do not have to know about it, obviously, because that would tell the suspect they're being recorded by law enforcement. And in the protection of minors is an exception. And if there is no expectation of privacy. So if you're on a public road, a public event, public sidewalk, there's no expectation of privacy. And so two-party consent is not required. But again, every case stands on its own merits.
So I just want to follow up on that. When you mentioned the protection of minors, so let's say, I have a babysitter at home taking care of my child. Can I legally place a camera then that's hidden inside the home because I'm concerned about the well-being of my child?
That is exactly correct. That is an exception under Florida law. And frankly, that's being a good parent. So you just never know. So I would encourage that.
So you don't have to tell the babysitter that the camera's there.
No, not especially if you're suspicious something's going on. I wouldn't do that. If you think you have a good babysitter and you just want to make sure they stay on the up and up, then let them know. But the choice is yours because that is an exception under Florida law.
So I just want to briefly talk about the Homeowners Association president who was arrested in your county. Any idea how long the camera had been there? Maybe how many people were recorded on it?
So we did a forensic autopsy on all his technology that he had that we seized during a search warrant. We know that the evidence that we have from that technology dates back to 2016.
Wow.
We know that there are 7 victims, at least we believe there are 7 Flagler County victims. He's been charged.
winds aloft, which on a tropical cyclone, those strong winds aloft they typically weaken the storms from developing, and you have the strongest winds in a pure tropical cyclone wrapped around. And you have the strongest winds in a pure tropical cyclone wrapped around the center of the storm. So although technically Nicole is now a tropical storm on the edge of becoming a hurricane, we're not seeing that classic hurricane shape. So one big factor with a subtropical storm is it's like a governor on the storm. It keeps it from rapidly intensifying. So we have no threats of this thing rapidly bombing out, becoming an Andrew, becoming a major hurricane. It's going to come ashore as a strong tropical storm, but a very big one that will have impacts all up and down the state of Florida. So it's important not to focus on the track. This is one of those storms where that center line means nothing. In fact, even though the storm is coming in towards the southern half of the state or even central Florida, the impacts here in North Florida will be exactly the same, no matter where it comes in.
And I think that really is a great point. It doesn't matter where you basically live here. If you're watching us in Northeast Florida, Southeast Georgia, it's going to be an impactful system. Yeah. And for some of us, and we've talked about this for a while, Mark, this looks like it could be a little bit worse than Ian, which is saying something because Ian was a major hurricane, and that's why we always stress every system is different and every system has local impacts. This one's going to be highly, highly based on where you live. If you live along the coastline, you already are seeing those winds just roaring along. That's not going to stop. In fact, if anything, the winds will pick up steam even more tonight heading into Thursday. Significant beach erosion. We probably are going to have some structural damage of some of those smaller structures, maybe even some windows blown out here just from the roaring wind and some of the rain that's going to come in. And then in inland areas, this is going to be a wind event as well as the system kind of pivots its way through the interior of the state, pops back out potentially in the Gulf of Mexico, and then pivots back into portions of South Georgia. So this is going to be a large, all-encompassing system, and that's why, especially along the coastline, it's probably going to be a system that's going to be more dramatic than Ian.
I agree 100% that this is going to be worse than Ian here in Northeast Florida. This is not a Southwest Florida impactful event, but for us here in North Florida, we had Ian that rolled off our coastline. The difference with Nicole is it's roaring towards the coastline. So we've had several days now of wave energy building up. Wave heights have reached 30 feet, 120 miles off the coastline. All that energy is headed our way, whereas with Ian, we were kind of getting a sideways blow of that wave energy. So what is the biggest threat? Tomorrow morning during high tide, it's going to be the surge. We are going to see 3 to 5 feet of water along our beaches, all the way backing up towards downtown in the river. So on the riverbank, 3 to 5 feet of water up until the Fuller Warren Bridge. South of the Fuller Warren Bridge, that's the I-95 interstate bridge, water will be about 2 to 4 feet. But because the winds are onshore, the West Bank is going to have higher water levels around Riverside, Ortega, versus, say, San Marco, Julington Creek. We'll also see that the high tide tomorrow on the river is about 11 o'clock. So although the beach south of the biggest surge during the morning hours, there's going to be a delayed response in the river more towards the early afternoon. So the high tide is at 11, but that water is still going to be rising through 1, 2, and 3 o'clock on the South Bank areas. And to put this into perspective, let's talk about Irma and Ian and where Nicole falls in between. That's right, it's going to be between those two storms. So my thoughts are with Ian, water levels got to 3 feet on the river. Here we could see 4 feet. And then Irma was 5.25 feet. So kind of in between there. So the Ribault River, Pirates Cove, some of that is going to be higher than Ian. So use what we saw a month ago as a reference for how you need to prepare with this storm. If you were really good, the water was below your bulkhead during Ian, then you really don't have much to sweat with this storm since water might be a foot higher. If water was at the bulkhead or already flooding during the last storm, you've got a lot to worry about. And today you've got almost a dry day to get those sandbags, but you're really coming up against the clock because as we head into the evening, rain's going to be coming through, and that sets us up for midnight steady rains all through tomorrow morning.
And I think that's a great point because we've already gone through a high tide cycle here in Jacksonville and along the coast. In fact, here at our station at Fort Broadcast Place, we've got some flooding now on the back areas near our employee parking lot. So if you already are seeing some issues in your neighborhood, and maybe it's just minor stuff right now, that's a precursor to what's going to happen much more intense tomorrow. And so I think that's a really good point you made, is if you had problems with Ian in any capacity, you're going to see that probably a little bit higher along the river and some of those tributaries as we head into that high tide cycle. And because the river is going to be backing up, we may go through multiple tide cycles here. So it may be not just one event and the water comes back down. It may be the water comes back up, comes back down, comes back up, similar to what we saw in Ian.
Even this morning was a reference in St. Augustine, the Matanzas River. We had salt water coming over the seawall, flooding downtown St. Augustine. That was the high tide. Tomorrow morning, we're going to see another high tide. Yet the difference is that those 30-foot seas are going to be closer to our shoreline. We're going to have stronger winds tomorrow. Along the coastal areas, 50 to 60 mile per hour winds, almost a given along St. Johns County and Flagler County. Summer Haven, Marine Land, those homes that have been stranded on the barrier islands and cut off from roads, some of those homes that fell into the ocean during Ian, guess what? This storm is going to be just as bad for those areas. So erosion is going to be significant. And even though I said 3 to 5 feet of surge expected along our beaches, those areas that were eroded more from Ian, that surge is likely to be higher there, almost like getting up to 6 feet above the ground level, simply because there's no protection from the dune line.
I think that's a great point, because we are seeing that already down in Volusia and Brevard counties, where a lot of those dunes just got eaten away by Ian recently, and in some cases they're almost completely gone. So some of the natural protection that we would see, especially down in St. Johns and Flagler County, that really got chewed up by Ian, that some of those basic protections are gone now. And so that water may kind of pour into some of those bays, inlets, jetties that we don't typically see with a tropical storm type event. Let's pivot, talk about the rainfall, because anytime we talk about tropical storms, we talk about rainfall. This one's going to be very odd in the fact we are not going to be talking about gigantic rainfall numbers. It would be stunning if anyone got to 10 to 12 inches of rainfall with this system. The system is going to be more in steady rain at times, but then also bands of rain. And so it's not going to be a steady onslaught of rain like some of the big storms like Irma and Ian have been. It's going to be, when it's all said and done, we're forecasting anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain. We're probably going to see some minor flooding, but nothing any more dramatic than what we see in a typical afternoon thunderstorm. So if there's some good news here with this system, although it's going to be impactful, we aren't going to see the widespread flooding issues, and that may help our situation along the river, because the river is not going to have to absorb so much water like it did with Ian.
Certainly, because this is a November storm, we don't have this really deep tropical moisture that we get with an August or September storm. So getting rainfall rates of almost 2 feet, like what we saw with Ian, probably not going to be realized with this storm. It's a big stretch, right? But one thing, there was a pretty sharp line from our southern communities that had 6 inches of rain versus even down into central Florida, which got that 2 foot. So that was a sharp gradient. This one's going to be tracking towards the Gulf, and so it's going to take a lot of that rain into the west side, maybe up to 2 inches of rain there.
That's a great point. Lake City, Waycross, Ian was a non-starter for you. This one is going to be different. You are going to end up with some rainfall. You're going to have probably more wind than what you had with Ian. So it will be impactful, but we're just not anticipating the big rain event.
And more wind goes all the way back to how Ian was concentrated around the center of the storm. This is broader, so those stronger winds are going to be reaching further across the state and impacting those inland folks.
You and I have talked about a lot behind the scenes, the tornado threat with this system tonight heading into Thursday. Unfortunately, it just kind of looks like it's going to be wait and see right now. A lot of it will depend on the exact landfall point, because with tornadoes, that is key. We will be on the active side, so there will be what we call rotation, or there'll be some spin in the atmosphere, some shear, but a large part of this will be based on whether we can get these small, what we call low-top supercells. These aren't going to be gigantic, huge thunderstorms like we deal with in the wintertime and even in the summertime. They'll be very, very small storms that will have the tendency to try to spin. And right now, we just don't know how that's going to play out tonight heading into tomorrow.
Early indications are that the threat for tornadoes will be very isolated, but working up from the south and moving inland and then into Georgia by the evening hours. So for the morning hours, I think our southern areas, St. Johns to Putnam County, possibly up into Jacksonville, and especially along the coastal areas, could see those. And as the storm moves inland, a lot of those threats will be moving inland. But there's that balance between strong updrafts and the spin of the atmosphere. When those two come together, you get those classic textbook long-lived tornadoes. That's not going to be the case with this type of system.
One of the big questions we always get is bridge closures. And again, it's kind of a wait and see at this point. Our suspicion is we're going to see any bridge closures. It's probably going to be those causeways heading out towards the coast.
Right. So what they're looking for is those 40-mile-per-hour winds, almost sustained there. They have the police parked at the foot of the bridge. As soon as they're out there with their anemometer, if the bridges are reaching those 40-mile-per-hour winds, they get shut down. So typically it's Dames Point or the Butler Bridge versus, say, the Main Street Bridge, which is usually the last to be closed down. But that's something that you want to be mindful. When everybody's asking us when, well, it wouldn't be until after midnight, more during those pre-dawn hours. I was telling people probably from around 6 a.m. to 11 tomorrow is the best times for some closure, simply because it looks like that's when we could see the strongest winds out of the system.
Yeah, and earlier in the week, we thought this system was going to be a large, slow-moving, lumbering system. One advantage, similar to Ian, is once it gets close to us, it's going to want to accelerate kind of up the east coast of the region. So we really think the worst weather is going to be overnight tonight, daytime hours on Thursday, and we may see some rapid improvement the back end of Thursday. One key difference with a November system compared to September is the dry air that's already in place across the region. We're already seeing some dry air getting sucked into the system. Very likely, as we head into Thursday evening, there may not be much rain left with this system, even in Georgia.
There'll be a rapid clear out into Friday, followed by a cold front and some cold temperatures on Sunday.
Yes.
Down in the 60s. Monday morning, maybe even some frost in Georgia. So big turnaround here. This is fall. So before we leave, quickly, the storm surge is the big impact on this. And it's such a concern with this storm that I'm writing a News4JAX article. It's going to show neighborhood by neighborhood snapshots of how high the water can get on there, including links as to where you can find your evacuation zone based on a GIS map. It's super simple. Type your address in, you can move in, expand the view, and see right where your home sits on those evacuation maps. So that's at news4jax.com. I'm Mark Collins, David Heckard here. We hope to see you on TV on Channel 4, the local station.
you.